To have the same souls in different roles creates consistency across alternative history. So, hey, I'm going to try something different today. Rachel, I love reading science fiction and stuff like that. And today we're going to discuss Kim Stanley Robinson's The Years of Rice and Salt. This one is really good. I read it for the first time when I was in Madagascar in 2024, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. So I read it again. Uh, and I want to talk to you about it. I'm going to start with a quick spoiler-free review slash overview. Then I'll go through the book part by part with a little discussion, and then we'll have a little overall discussion. And I hope you too will enjoy the experience of this amazing book. The Years of Rice and Salt by Kim Stanley Robinson asks the question, what would happen if the Black Death killed everybody in Europe instead of just the third of people that it killed in our timeline? And basically what happens is a world without Christianity, and this book retells the history of that world without Christianity. Um, it does this really cool thing where the characters are the same across all of the books. Rather, they're the same souls, but in different bodies and different roles and different relationships to each other. They call themselves a jati, a group of souls that came into being together, and they're always connected in all of their lives. They manage to find each other, and they sort of recognize something about this person that makes them want to acknowledge that they're important. Like, oh, this person sort of rings true to me. I need to stay with them and see what we can do. Let's build together. So I highly recommend this book. I read it for the first time in Madagascar in 2024, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. So I read it again in 2025. Some of it is beautiful and peaceful. Some of the characters are poets, and it has poetry in it. But it's also full of action and excitement, um, and tiger fights and eunuchs and great ocean journeys and they do not forget the people in the New World across the sea, which is of course called something different. Anyway, Years of Rice and Salt, Kim Stanley Robinson, 10 out of 10. Highly recommend. You will not be able to stop thinking about it. Book one is called Awake to Emptiness, and it stars Bold Bardash, a Mongolian warrior who is part of a big horde on the Mongol steppes, and he and his fellows have been tasked to recon Europe, basically, in preparation for an assault. But they find everyone dead, and when they return back to their camp and say there was a plague there, their leader, Timur, he tries to have them killed, so they run away. So Bull does suffer a lot from loneliness, but the thing that he suffers from most is hunger. As it says on page 17, no person ate entirely by his own efforts. No one. Like even if you're a farmer, you need tools from the blacksmith, etc., etc. So he does a lot of scavenging and some hunting with a bow he's able to find, but he is really like he is starving and just absolutely at the end of his rope when he hits the coast. And there he gets captured by slave traders. And he is so happy to see another person. He's like, "Yeah, sell me into slavery." Um, and he finds out they're Muslim, so he's says some kind things about Allah. He's like, it won't keep them from selling me, but it might make them feed me some more. Aboard the slave ship that Bold is taken to, that is where it's the only really disturbing event in this book takes place, like the only not for sensitive viewers type of moment, and it's when a young boy, also a slave that Bold has befriended in the hold of this ship, is castrated and made into a eunuch. And we have to watch it and the aftermath, and Bold cares for this boy Q. Bold and Q, the newly eunuched boy, are members of the same jati. Now, what that means is, like I said, there's a bunch of mystical parts to this book, and in those parts, it explains that no one knows how and why souls come into being, but when souls do come into being out of the void, they do so in a group. That group of souls is called the jati, and the people in that jati are destined to find each other in life after life, to be important to each other, and to travel through the afterlife together. So Bold and Q are members of the same jati, and the restaurateurs who purchase them are also members of that jati. There is Shen and Eileen. Now, the easiest way to keep track of the jati is the first letters of their names, and that's kept pretty consistent throughout the books as a device to help you figure out who's who. So I I spent a bunch of time going through. They say it's about a dozen people in a jati, and so I can tell you that person whose name starts with B, K, S, and I, they are all definitely in the Jati, and I would call B, K, and I the three most main characters. Um, and those characters, their character, uh, is consistent from book to book. They do grow, of course, but like um, B is always there to help other members of his Jati. Kay is always fiery and passionate and wants to change the world. And I is so curious. I wants to know everything. He was an African boy, and we don't know exactly how he was captured, but we know he has a fiery desire to escape this restaurant life. So he like burns the whole place down and takes Bold with him, and Bold really has no choice but to go because if they get caught for the fire, they're both gonna die. So Q is like, we're going to where the emperor is. We're going to this brand new city that they are just building right now, Beijing. We're gonna go there and try to make our fortunes. They end up working in the household of the heir designate of the current dynasty in China, as they are in, in Beijing, and they work for him for many, many years. But Q, the violence and passion in his heart, and the injustice of being made a eunuch, none of that will let him rest. And he ends up committing some crimes there as well that get both him and Bold killed. Robinson has done this very helpful thing where Bold, the main character of the first book, is a religious man, and his religion is objectively correct in this book. And in this religion, when people die, they go to what's called the Bardo, Bardo, and it's a place between worlds where the Jati gathers and judgment is meted out upon them. Old's prayers are designed to guide a soul through the afterlife, so this he does for Q, telling him to do things like not to lie to the people judging him, and things like that. Um, yeah, don't tell any lies, don't be frightened, don't be terrified, don't fear the Lord of Death. The body you're in now is only a mental body. You can't die in the Bardo even if they hack you to pieces. Thanks, Q thought uneasily. That is such a comfort. Now comes the moment of judgment. Hold fast. Think good thoughts. Remember, all these events are your own hallucinations, and what life comes next depends on your thoughts now. In a single moment of time, a great difference is created. Don't be distracted when the six lights appear. Regard them all with compassion. Face the Lord of Death without fear. The six worlds that Bold is referring to are called lokas, the realms of rebirth and illusion. Heaven, the world of the devas, then the world of the Asuras, those giants full of dissension, then the human world, then the animal world, then the world of pretas, or hungry ghosts, then hell. We move between them as our karma changes, life by life. And there are perhaps a dozen in the Jati. The group blurs the boundaries. Some go away and don't come back until much later. We were a village that time in Tibet, but there were visitors, traders, fewer every time. People get lost or fall away, as you've been doing when the despair strikes. When they're both in the bardo together, Bold tells Q that thoughts are things, the parents of all actions, good and bad alike. And as the sowing has been, so the harvest will be. And throughout book one, Bold has this beautiful litany, gone, 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 gone altogether beyond. He repeats this as a meditation when he's wandering through Europe, alone, and then, again later when he is in trouble. It's part of his religion and a comfort to him. Gone, 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 gone altogether beyond. Book two is called The Hajj and the Heart and actually covers several lifetimes of B, K, and I, those main members of the Jat. In this book, the character whose name starts with I is the mother of the one whose name starts with B, and B is best friends with the one whose name starts with K. Um, B has some bad things happen to her and dies as consequence, and so K goes and poisons the person who is responsible. And because of this deed, K is then sentenced to live a life as a tiger. And so we get to live with K through her life as a tiger. Essentially, she was made a tiger because she acted like an animal, and then as the tiger, she acted like a human. She had an opportunity to kill a new incarnation of B, but she didn't. She saved him, she protected him, she let him pass. And she is ultimately killed by humans because she came too close to the human settlement too many times. When Kay as a tiger is killed, B sees this as an opportunity and a sign to go carry on his life elsewhere. And it turns out that he is a Muslim scholar. So he travels to the Middle East and he goes to work for a sultan named Akbar, who is at first likes him very much and befriends him, but is capricious and eventually drops him. But B goes so far into his religion, like he gets so pious and he prays and fasts so much that like all he sees is a white light and everything's shining, and he's like too holy for this for the sultan to kill him the way he wants to. So instead, he sends him on a Hajj, which is a pilgrimage to Mecca. After the Hajj, the B character, Bistami, is sort of left at loose ends, so he ends up living in Mecca for a while, and it's a really interesting experience to be a local when the next Hajj comes in the next year, and suddenly he has this whole huge shift of perspective, and he decides to go traveling. In his travels, Bastami ends up meeting and befriending the I named character, who is also a Muslim scholar, and the two of them travel through Egypt and across Africa, and finally end up in what we would call Spain and what they call Al Andalus. So this is now about 200, 250 years post-plague, and at this point, people have started to reclaim Al-Andalus. A lot of infrastructure was left over. There are still a lot of orchards and things like that, and the new people who are coming in are finding it a wonderfully pleasant place to live. So this part here, while they're in Al-Andalus talking to the people who live there, that's where we get our first real speculation in the book about what caused the plague and what caused it to hit the people there so hard. A worker in a field there, for example, feels that the Christians in the area had grown so corrupt that God took them down. Until our scholars point out that there were Muslims living on this stretch of land as well, and they also died. And there's a discussion about both good and evil, and also possible vectors for disease transmission. The I character, who wants to know everything, in this book, he's known as Ibn Ezra. And he's actually talking here. There's this whole bit where he's talking about hybridization of plants and animals, how he feels that it probably works the same way with humans, and so therefore also with diseases, and how this particular disease seems to have like eaten all of its food and then died off. And so this area is wholesome once again. And then something exciting happens. A sultan and his sultana, who are looking for a new land, show up with a big caravan of people who are following them to also start a new land. And they are planning on traveling north to what we would call France and what they call Faranja. And our characters, B and I, decide to join them, which is very handy because Kay is the Sultana. After her life as a tiger, she becomes this beautiful queen. And although B notices that she has the same mark on her forehead that the tiger who saved him in his youth also had. Anyway, this group, they call themselves the Caravan of Fools, do end up making it to Faranja and founding a city of tolerance where people can practice their own religions and be themselves, and that's okay. When they meet up back in the Bardo, the afterlife again, Kay is angry and depressed. She feels like they've been chased to a hole at the far end of the world. But B is like, no, that was actually wonderful. I saw through time. I felt the touch of the eternal. We made a place where people could love the good. Little steps, life after life, and eventually we will be there for good, in the white light. And Ibn Ezra, he agrees and also says, my impression is that any improvement in the tenor of existence will have to be anthropogenic, which is that it's up to us. No one will help us. We have to do this ourselves, but not ourselves by ourselves. We have to do this together. The third book is called Ocean Continents, and in this one, the Chinese emperor wants to conquer Japan, so he sends out a big fleet under command of our K character, Admiral Kim. Unfortunately, because of wind and tide, they miss Japan entirely and end up way out in the Pacific, which they call the Dahai, the Great Ocean. And at this point, the only reason that they don't despair is that Admiral Kim has as his advisor the I character, I Ching. He's a doctor, and he claims that he's gotten stuck in this current before. and that it's a circle. That if they stay in this current, they will eventually get taken back to China. As you might imagine, this unknown journey that no one knows how exactly it will turn out is very stressful for the men, both physically and emotionally. So when they do sight something they think is an island, of course they go and land. They call it Yingzhu or ocean continents. It turns out this is actually the New World. They make landing twice in this one. First in, I think, what is now North America, and once what is now South America. When they make that first landfall, which I think is somewhere in North America, maybe Pacific Northwest or California or something like that, they meet a very friendly people. And at first, they think that they're somewhat primitive because they don't have the same technology as the Chinese people. And then they realize, oh, these people don't have certain technologies that we have because they don't need them. This is a land of such plenty that these people don't have to have agriculture in order to sustain themselves. This tribe that they make contact with includes a little girl who's really curious about their language. So, I Ching teaches her Chinese and she teaches him as much of her native language as she can. And he tries to write a dictionary about it. And like they have a good relationship and stuff. They call her Butterfly because she like is so bright and runs around all happy and fluttering. And she becomes their interpreter. And because of this, they end up taking her with them when they leave. They end up having to leave quite abruptly because it turns out that one of their members had smallpox when he was young, and that smallpox has transferred to the villagers. So that the smallpox plague hits the New World much earlier in this version of events. The second place they make landfall in this new world is not quite so friendly to them. They run into a culture that practices human sacrifice, and they try to sacrifice Butterfly, and our guys have to go all out to rescue her. Like they take her like all the way up the Andes to the brim of a volcano, and the guys have to go up, and like everyone's suffering from altitude sickness. I like watching videos about people climbing mountains and stuff, so I know everyone's suffering from altitude sickness, and Robinson doesn't say so because obviously these people wouldn't know, but like he writes the fuzziness in people's heads like correctly for what they are experiencing at that altitude, that lack of oxygen and therefore brain power. And the only reason they're able to affect this escape is because our guys have guns and these people don't have guns yet. At this point, when they get back on the sea, the current starts turning back in the direction of China again, and they are able to return to China, but unfortunately, there's a big storm and Butterfly is killed. And and of course, this makes everybody very angry and very sad. And they see her as something of a goddess who is there to protect them, and that she like died that they might live, essentially. As Kim says to the Emperor when they get back, that far country is lost in time, its streets paved with gold, its palaces roofed with gold. You could conquer it in a month and rule over all its immensity and bring back all the treasure that it has, endless forests and firs, turquoise and gold, more gold than there is yet now in the world. And yet still the greatest treasure in that land is already lost. Then back in the afterlife again, all of this has made our K character, who was Admiral Keem, so angry that he attempts to kill the god of death. Um, Unfortunately, when you try to kill the god of death, what happens is that she doubles and then both of her come after you. Uh, and thus we move into book four. Book four is called The Alchemist. It takes place about 20 years after the last book, and is about an alchemist, his son in law, and his buddy that he likes to do experiments with. K is the alchemist, B is his son in law, and I is the Tibetan monk who's also a glassblower and his best friend, and they like to do experiments together. Um, Kay is an alchemist. He is, the alchemist of the title of this book. And alchemy, as you may know, is the pseudoscience of attempting to turn lead into gold, which is impossible. And even in our own time, it captured the brain of like a bunch of smart people and forced them onto this path that is not science. Um, Luckily for us and for Kay and for everyone in this world, actually, Kay attempts to demonstrate his alchemy to the local sultan, and fails badly, of course, because it's not possible. And he gets really depressed. Um, and then I figures out how to spark his curiosity again, which makes him live again. And I gets involved in essentially real science. They start doing actual experiments. They try to figure out how fast the speed of sound is and how fast the speed of light. They do a lot of work with prisms and vacuum, and stuff like that. And these demonstrations are much more successful. Now, as part of the consequences for that original failed demonstration of alchemy, the Sultan has Kay's right hand cut off. As a Muslim, this means that with only a left hand, he is forever unclean. He can't do certain religious practices, etc., etc. He feels like he can't even touch his wife anymore. And so, of course, he gets really depressed until his friend, our character, I, gets him involved in doing real experimentation. Um, they figure out like the real scientific method together and actually do experiments and then record them and hypothesize and and the whole thing that you learned in seventh grade science. So all this experimenting is very good for both the area and the state of science and people in the world in general. So like in later parts of the book, this time and place is referred to as the flowering of Samarkand. And it's all thanks to Kay and I's experiments. So the two of them are seeing the world through a lens of investigation, whereas Kay's son in law, B, sees it through a lens of love. And feels that love must infuse everything or it has no meaning. And I think Kay sort of maybe comes around to that a little bit. Uh, but mostly because he loves his own family. Uh, and as a consequence of the good science that's going on, the Sultan tasks Kay and I with creating new and better armaments, with like finding new and better ways to kill his enemies. So, because the Sultan will kill them if they don't, they start to work on the Sultan's armaments, as he has asked. And they come up with all of these improvements in cannoneering and in fortifications and things like that. And they are really bringing along and up like sort of the art of war, I guess. And then a plague comes along and kills all of them. And they meet up once again in the Bardo. And when we get back to the Bardo again, they're really depressed. Of course, this is a sad end for all of them and all at once. And looking back down the veil of the ages at the endless recurrence of their reincarnations before they were forced to drink their vials of forgetting, and all became obscure to them again. They could see no pattern at all to their efforts. If the gods had a plan, or even a set of procedures, if the long train of transmigrations was supposed to add up to anything, if it was not just mindless repetition, time itself nothing but a succession of chaoses, no one could discern it. And the story of their transmigrations, rather than being a narrative without death, as the first experiences of reincarnation perhaps seemed to suggest, had become instead a veritable charnel house. Why read on? Uh, and the reason is simple because these things happen. These things happen countless times, just like this. The oceans are salt with our tears. No one can deny that these things happened. And so there's no choice in the matter. They cannot escape the wheel of birth and death, nor in the experience of it, or in the contemplation of it afterward. And their anthologist, old Red Ink himself, must tell their stories honestly, must deal in reality, or else the stories mean nothing. And it is crucial that the stories mean something. So, no escape from reality. Uh, there is no escape from reality, even the reality of death. Uh, and like they said, sometimes you see a series of lives as lives, and instead they see a series of lives as a series of deaths. And what can they do? But like they say in The Good Place, it's a crappy deal, but we aren't offered any other ones. We aren't offered any other deals, so if we want anything else, we have to get to work on making it ourselves. Uh, and Kay, at the end of their time in the Bardo this time, He's very angry at B, for being obsessed with love for that whole life. And he's like, love, 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 whatever. I want justice. What can you do in your next life to bring justice instead of just happy, happy love? And B's like, all right, I'll take that challenge. And B not only takes that challenge, but he crushes it. Book 5 is called Warp and Weft, and it takes place in the New World. The people that we live among for Warp and Weft are called the Haudenosaunee. They are a league of what we would call Native Americans living in the Great Lakes area, and they have figured out um, a democratic system of tribal governments that allows them to seamlessly integrate new tribes whenever they come across them. So this keeps the whole confederation. Uh, Peaceful and interwoven. They have several means of warp and weft. They have both like tribe and they have like um animal like clans within the tribes, and you have to like marry certain, like each these three clans can only marry these three clans or whatever, but like your loyalty to your clan is as much as your worth as much as to your tribe, and like all six clans are in each tribe. So everybody, this sets up a system where everybody has loyalty both to their local people and to at least a sixth of all other people within their country. The main event of this book deals with the induction into the tribe of a man that they call From West, who is our B character. And after a long evening of lacrosse and feasting and dancing, it's time for the new guy to tell his story. And he tells the tribe, essentially, in much more eloquent language, that he is a Ronin from Japan. And when China conquered Japan, he was a revolutionary. He fought to the last to try and protect the independence of his people, but they lost, and he ultimately was forced to flee to the New World, where he saw the same thing happening. He saw Chinese settlers completely overwhelming Japanese settlers and the native peoples of the area, who luckily are not at this time decimated with smallpox because they already had that incident happen a couple of books ago. So our B character, he fights on behalf of the local Japanese people on the west coast of what we would call the US for a little while. Uh, and then he starts journeying back east. And along the way, he learns local language. He becomes a captive of some people, and then the Haudenosaunee rescue him, and he ends up as part of their tribe. And as part of the story, we also learn that while China is in control of the west coast of the New World, Muslims are in control of the east. People sailed out from Faranja and Al Andalus and are now bringing their culture and their practices and their religion to the east coast of the New World. And From West warns the Haudenosaunee. These people, they have all these technologies that you don't, and because of that, they have far greater numbers than you, and they will never stop coming. Um, Everywhere else in the world, guns rule, and only emperors really have a say in their own lives, and everyone is just involved in this system of oppressing the people below them, and everyone oppresses women. And as soon as the gun of oppression is not pointed to their foreheads, they will run away and rebel, and so everything is turmoil in this other world, and they're trying to bring that to your world. They're trying to bring that to your land, uh, and if you don't want that to happen, you have to do something, and you have to do it now. So From West then goes off in this whole diatribe about all the technologies that the others have that the Haudenosaunee will need to replicate if they want to make it in the world, and ends with an exhortation that they must develop essentially guns and writing and ships, and they must resist the foreigners coming to their shores. There will be a war eventually. Um, but they have to do everything they can to make sure that that war will be as much on their terms as possible so they stand the best chance of survival that they can. And From West, our B character, is successful in getting the leaders to listen to him and to put up a resistance. And they live good, long lives working on this project. And thus it was that many years later, when the Jatiid again convene in the Bardo, the From West says, you have to admit it. I did what you demanded of me. I went out in the world and fought for what was right, and we did some good again. This time around, the Bardo's gotten a lot more complicated. Like, so complicated, they need a manual to get through it. There's a whole bunch of rooms they have to pass through and stuff. Ultimately, they have to drink the wine of forgetting so that they can't go into their future life knowing anything about the Bardo or about their past life. So the Jati formulates a plan. They're going to do whatever they can to avoid drinking the wine of forgetting. This will give them extra information when they go back down to Earth and will hopefully allow them to create something new and better. Some of them have more success at this than others, but ultimately, they do all end up in a new life and they're back in China again. Book six is called The Widow Kang, and this is one of my favorite in the whole book because I love the Widow Kang. Uh, this is Kang again. She's now a middle-aged lady. She has had several children, and her first husband is passed, and she is now into the widowhood status of her life, which in her time and place requires very specific action and propriety, and she always maintains this propriety. Kang is a very well respected poet and silk weaver. And the family that she was born to was both rich and traditional enough that her feet were bound as a child. After she becomes a widow, she goes through various trials and tribulations, but ultimately she ends up meeting a Muslim scholar, a man named Ibrahim, and this is our I character, our wants to know everything soul. Kang and Ibrahim find themselves drawn to each other, and they end up doing this exercise where they look in a candle and sort of each other's eyes, and they end up being able to see glimpses of their past lives and their past lives together. And uh, it scares them enough that they don't really talk about it much, but it definitely creates an unbreakable bond. And over time, the two of them do fall in love and get married. And she does move with him away from the center of China into a place where Chinese and Muslim culture are mixing. And this is a big hallmark of both this book and the relationship in general, which is the mixing of the two cultures and the mixing of cultures in general being where new culture and new practices are created. Many years later, an age later, two old people sat on their veranda watching the river flow. In their time together, they had discussed all things. They had even written a history of the world together, but now they seldom spoke, except to note some feature of the waning day. Very rarely did they talk about the past, and they never spoke at all at that time they had sat together in a dark room, diving into the light of the candle and seeing there strange glimpses of former lives. It was too disturbing to recall the awe and terror of those hours. And besides, the point had been made, the knowledge gained. That they had known each other 10,000 years? Of course. They were an old married couple. They knew, and that was enough. There was no need to delve further into it. This too is the Bardo, or Nirvana itself. This is the touch of the eternal. Like, Kang and Ibrahim are the old married couple sitting on the porch watching the river go by and loving each other forever, and like they're one of my favorite old married couples in all of literature, I think. The book talks about how the two of them they're if you read both of their academic works sort of collated, you can read them as like a conversation that they're having with each other, like that their works sort of respond to each other and go like, like, well, as some might say, but I believe instead, and they do a lot of talking about a lot of discussion about Islam and Buddhism and Confucianism and how the two mix and how the greatest vitality and change is to be found in a place where two cultures uh, collide and mix and people are forced to live with each other. And they're in different mediums too. Like Kang writes poetry and Ibrahim writes treatises. So you do have to be following multiple genres. Um, Kang, one of the things that she's famous for that I really wanted to mention was the fact that she is a great collector and anthologist of what they call women's poetry. And the poetry throughout this book, throughout The Widow Kang, is lovely and really adds an extra flavor to this thing that just takes it a little touch above the rest. Different people of different cultures are forced to innovate, to find ways to live together and make it as pleasant as possible. And Kang and Ibrahim together are that in microcosm. Near the end of this book, Ibrahim writes this paper called Wealth and the Four Inequalities that becomes a seminal text for scholars in the rest of the future of this book. Uh, and it talks about how women have been oppressed and poor people keep getting poorer and rich people keep getting richer, the powerful gain more power, etc., etc. The result has been that while a small percentage of human beings have lived in a wealth of food, material comfort, and learning, those not so lucky have been the functional equivalent of domestic beasts and harnessed to the powerful and well off, creating their wealth for them, but not benefiting from it themselves. If you happen to be a young black farm girl, what can you say to the world to you? You exist under all four of the great inequalities and will live a shortened life of ignorance, hunger, and fear. Indeed, it only takes one of the great inequalities to create such conditions. So must it be said that the majority of humans ever to have lived have existed in conditions of immiseration and servitude to a small minority of wealthy and powerful people. Um, and he says that my feeling is that until the number of whole lives, that is, people not broken and suffering under all those inequalities, until the number of whole lives is greater than the number of shattered lives, we remain stuck in some kind of prehistory, unworthy of humanity's great spirit. History is a story worth telling, will only begin when the whole lives outnumber the wasted ones. That means we have many generations to go before history begins. All the inequalities must end. All the surplus wealth must be equitably distributed. Until then, we are only some kind of gibbering monkey, and humanity, as we usually like to think of it, does not yet exist. To put it in religious terms, we are still indeed in the bardo, waiting to be born. And then, after one is born, at this time and place, it is considered that there are six life stages: milk teeth, hair pinned up, marriage, children, rice and salts, and widowhood. And I think it is no coincidence that this, The Widow Kang, is the sixth book of the Years of Rice and Salt. And after Kang reads her husband's treatise about wealth and the four great inequalities, she sort of like puts her hand on his shoulder and goes inside and writes a beautiful poem to finish off this book six. And it talks about how, of all the years and all the life stages that she's been through, the years of rice and salt were her best. And that makes sense to me. The years of rice and salt are a time of middle age, a time of hard work when it's especially useful to have a partner, not only to help you, but also to help you learn. And Kang and Abraham, they have that. They've found that in each other, um, and are rewarded with this beautiful, beautiful ending at last. Kang and Ibrahim got married in about our year 1800 or so. And the next book, book seven, The Age of Great Progress, that takes place like 20 or 30 years later in India. What's really cool about book seven is that we get to see what India would have been like without colonialism. Like, the plague killed off all the Europeans, so there's no more British people, so there's no British colonialism. So India was actually free to develop the way it was going to. And in this book, it ends up as a league of free states. It's called Travancore, the Travancore League, and it has some resemblance to the Haudenosaunee Society across the sea. Jati is here too, of course. And the big inspirational leader that's been bringing India together, that's our K character. He goes by the Kerala, and he is absolutely committed to stamping out all four of the great inequalities. He says, only when we have to experience no more suffering than what life brings us for being born and having to die, then we will see what kind of creatures we really are. To further this goal, the Kerala encourages rapid technological innovation and expansion. So Travancore develops steam power, metal hulls, gunboats, stuff like that. And the lead in this technology allows the Indian lead to compete with the larger rivals on either side of it. The larger rivals are China and Dar al-Islam, like Islam as a whole, which, because of some other events here, ends up uniting. And then this unintended consolidation starts a bunch of little wars, which turn into bigger and bigger wars. Um, and Eventually, China and Dar al Islam begin a war of potential annihilation. The Indian League tried to remain neutral, but then the other empires started attacking them and the Haudenosaunee as well, and they're forced to get involved in this world war. And that brings us to book 8, The War of the Asuras. So it turns out that we in our world, in our timeline, were actually lucky to get just two short world wars because in this timeline, they get one 67-year long world war and it devastates the entire world. The war may be long, but this section of the book is actually pretty short. It's fairly poetic and dreamy and not as straightforward, not nearly as straightforward as most of the other sections of the book. For example, all our characters are on the front lines of battle, and none of them are really ever quite sure whether they're alive or dead. He straightened up. Kay, he said, we thought you were dead. Kay nodded. I am dead, and so are you. The shell went off, he said, and killed us all. Since then, you've been in the bardo. All of us have. You've gone at it by pretending you weren't there yet. Although why you would want to hang on to that hell world we were living in, I can't imagine. You're so damn obstinate, Bee. You need to see you're in the bardo to be able to understand what's happening to you. It's the war in the bardo that matters, after all. The battle for our souls. Because of all this, B starts seeing the areas where he's forced to go as set pieces rather than battlefields. Everything feels Sisyphean, really. They are working their way up mountains, building railroads up those mountains, and shooting guns over them, and everything gets weird because they can't see the enemy because by now they have perfected missile technology, and so they're actually far away enough from each other that they can't see their enemy face to face anymore. Now, as the Bardo sections tell us, Asura is the level above human. It's like the demigod level or something. So for this to be the War of the Asuras means that our characters, our Jati, have potentially gone up a level in the world of reincarnation, and yet it does not help them. They land there during this terrible war and are immediately sent back down. My personal theory is that this happened because um, they all lived like three really good lives full of self improvement and improvement of the world, and so they were promoted, and then they end up fighting in this war and are like I said, sent immediately back down to the level of human. Because of all this, there's a lot of discussion in this book about the nature of reality, the nature of God and the cosmos. And there's this quote that I like. What followed was an understanding of human reality that placed the greatest value on compassion, created by enlightened understanding, created by study of what was there in the world. So that right there is bolstering all of the alchemist book stuff that real science is indeed a kind of compassion. For example, yeah, in The Alchemist, K and I were very scientific, and B was all about love. And B made the point that all of the science, it doesn't matter nearly as much without the love. And these characters seem to still feel that way several lifetimes later. When they're back in the Bardo for sure at the end of this book, Kay says, we failed. We killed reality itself. Do you understand me? And that's why they're being sent back down. So now we are in this lower realm. We must make do. Our Dharma still commands right action, even here, in the hope of small advances upward, until reality itself be reestablished by millions of lives of effort. The whole world will have to be rebuilt. That's where we are now. And so they are sent down once again to help repair the world, and that brings us to book 9, Nsara. In book 8, all of our characters were Chinese again, and they won the war. In book 9, Nsara, we are back into Dar al Islam in the equivalent of our 1990s or so. This book begins with one of the four great inequalities fully on display: the oppression of women by men. All of the women in Bee's life, including herself, are cloistered inside of her father's house and not allowed to go anywhere alone. Even though her Aunt I is a famous physicist and is just in this house for like a little while to recoup after like a messy divorce. Now, I, the famous physicist, has been working with another Jati member, P, but mostly over the phone. He is in Nsara, and all of the women are in like a outer lying, in a city that's elsewhere in what we would call France. Um, And Nsara is on the shore of France. It's a beautiful modern city, and uh, through her correspondence with P, I gets really concerned about um, what we would call radiation. She is in, essentially, she is the Marie Sklodowska-Curie of their world, and she discovers the radiation effects, and she does ultimately die of radiation poisoning before anybody understood that that would do that. So I is worried about all this, and she escapes back to the city so that she can continue her work. B, who is like 23 and feeling very oppressed, follows her and is able to begin a life of school and charity and coffee house talk and things like that. Like she has a real life. She gets to be a real grown up. And at first, she's really stunned that no one from her family comes after her. Like she's been kept in this cloister her entire life and never allowed to leave without supervision. And like she's just sort of escaped and now she's gone and no one cares. They're not even going to try to bring her back. They don't even answer her letters. There's also a lot of discussion in this book about the harem, the cloistering, and its relationship to queer love and women loving other women. And it's introduced as like, hey, we lost so many men in the Great War that there's like one man for every like 10 women. So most women will just never get married. And at that point, even Dar al-Islam has accepted that women will be loving women because there just aren't enough men to go around. Anyway, this one's fun to read because B goes through a wonderful growing up process and learning about the world and meeting some compelling people, while at the same time having to deal with the general local oppression of women, as well as the trouble that her aunt is running into because of her dangerous research. Her Aunt Adelba, she has figured out that you could make a big bomb using all of this stuff, and she is doing her best to try to keep governments from knowing this, um, and is very, very concerned that this could lead to a war even worse than the Long War that was 67 years long and turned most of the world into what looks like a World War One battlefield. Tragically, Aunt I dies before she's able to bring her research to the world, but B and P, who were her assistants and partners, carried on her research after her passing. And eventually, they are invited to a worldwide conference of scientists. And there at that conference, at one point, they go to a gathering that is specifically in celebration of Aunt I and her work and to remember her. And B, at this conference, at this particular meeting, takes the opportunity to propose a new organization, to propose that scientists take a larger role in world governments so that to prevent future long wars, to prevent great destruction. And in order to do this, they're going to make sure that the radiation and atomic energy type information and technology is going to be common knowledge among physicists and probably nobody else, but common knowledge among all physicists so that no government in the world has the advantage in potentially being able to build this terrible technology. So they're attempting to keep nuclear proliferation from happening before it ever starts. And as far as we know, they are successful. And as part of a way to ingratiate themselves into government, B suggests that the scientists create things like standardized weights and measures and a standardized date. Like they're all in different histories at that moment because for everybody, it's a completely different date, like sometimes thousands of years apart. So they choose that conference as a New Year Zero. This conference is also where we, as the reader, learn the secret of this Jati's particular closeness. We have heard them mentioned a few times in the Bardo. We've been particularly close since the avalanche, but we haven't learned anything more about it. It's been mentioned 2 or 3 times, but that's all we know. Then at this particular conference, B sees a presentation about a Tibetan village that was buried by an avalanche, and the people there essentially suffocated to death. and it was most of their jati that was there together and were forced to slowly die together, and that's why that they've been so close ever since. And um I don't know exactly what effect this has in the world. Maybe it makes them easier to find each other or to recognize each other, which would make stronger bonds easier, and therefore more action possible. Because when you can trust someone, you can do more together. You can accomplish more together. As they say when they're back in the Bardo, we have thousands of lifetimes of work to do, but it's working. Um, they are making a difference, however small, and that's important. And is called The First Years. And the beginning of it deals with this world's Chinese Revolution. Our B and K characters are revolutionaries, and they managed to make the whole thing happen. Uh, K, unfortunately, is assassinated at the moment of triumph, but B lives to become old, and B is sort of at loose ends here. Like he had this entire life as a revolutionary when he was young, and now he's like a respected professor, but mostly nobody, and he just sort of like hangs out and teaches and whatnot. He's definitely a good guy. He's all about like, I feel that I can learn a lot from my students, and that's why I teach. He's that kind of teacher. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of reflection on, how many lifetimes we live in one life. In B's classes, we get a lot of discussion about reincarnation, what it means for both the individual and society. And there's also some fun meta about like stories of reincarnation, where each the main character's the first letter of the name is kept. This is a device, of course, merely to help the reader know who's who. But of course, this is not the way it is in the real world. Reincarnation aside, the book talks a lot about individualist versus collectivist cultures in general, and how each has its merits and each seems to come into ascendance during different types of events in history. Ultimately, as the Travancores and the Haudenosaunee figured out first and tried to share with the rest of the world, um, leagues woven together are the best form of government that they've been able to find. Government that gives people individual power while at the same time citing them safely in a society that is collectivist enough to be watching out for each other. And this, I believe, is one of the theses of the book that Robinson is positing, that this manner of government, these leagues that are both collectivist and individualist, are the types of government that lead to the least suffering for the most amount of people. Another thing I found really interesting about this book is that exactly two things seem to be immutable: your internal, like, core character, and who you're close to, like who your jati is. And otherwise, every single thing about you can change: your religion, your position in society, gender, etc., etc. Everything except those two things changes constantly throughout this book. A and I, for example, are science partners, lab buddies in the Alchemist setting, but in the Widow Kang, they're a happily married couple. Either way, they work well together. They help each other reach greater heights, and they each help give the world a greater gift. And a lot of it is based off of their relationships with each other, even when they're entirely different relationships. I also like that this book says it's okay for growth to be slow. Like, it's important to pursue growth, but it's okay if you move at a snail's pace. It's okay if you move, forward the length of a grain of sand. You're still moving forward. Also, this book makes me want to be more mindful about how I move forward in my life, and to be more intentional about my relationships with the people I really care about. This book is epic, and it's one of those books where the more I read it, the more I see in it. It was definitely worth rereading, and I highly recommend that you read it as well. I've told you what happens in the story, but I don't think I've actually spoiled the experience of reading the book, and there's a lot that I left out, of course, as is necessary in an over 700-page book. Finally, to put a little cap, tie a little bow around this review, I'm gonna get a little poetic. My love, I could not save you in this life, maybe in the next. Made it this far. Thank you. This is my first real video, and about books, and like it's the first thing that I'm like, oh, I'm really trying and I care about this, and it's gonna hurt real bad if this one fails because it's something I really care about. Anyway, please like, subscribe, comment, etc. I would love to have a discussion with this book about somebody without having to force one of my family or friends to read the thing. And I'm working on a video about Starship Troopers too. I haven't decided whether I'll release that one first or this one, but please enjoy that one as well and have a delicious day. To have the same souls in different roles creates consistency across alternative history.